I knew something was wrong the moment the door clicked behind me. Wrong in that sharp, unmistakable way a woman my age feels danger before she fully understands it. And when I turned, seeing my grandson's grin through the glass, I realized the kind of danger wasn't physical at all. It was the danger of finally understanding your place in your own family. It was Aiden's laugh that cut deepest. Bright, thoughtless, cruel in the way only youth can manage. "Come on, Grandma," he said through the door, phone raised, already recording. "Just a joke. Don't look so serious." The deadbolt slid into place with a deliberate, metallic finality. 65 years of life, and somehow I still hadn't learned that humiliation can arrive softly, wrapped in a smile you once loved, delivered by hands you helped raise. The afternoon air was warm, heavy with the scent of the hydrangeas I'd been trimming. My knees ached from kneeling. My gloves were still on. And there I stood, locked outside my own home, as my 19-year-old grandson filmed me like some kind of entertainment. He didn't know the cameras above the door. 3 of them didn't belong to him or his parents or the security service Daniel pretended to understand. They were mine, bought with my money, installed on my instructions. Every angle of this porch, every corner of my yard, every doorway and hallway, it all fed into the account registered under my name alone, just like the house. But Aiden had never asked, and I'd made the lifelong mistake of never saying. "Hold on, Grandma, I want to get your face," he said, stepping back, framing me like he was shooting a comedy skit. I felt something inside me twist, not break, no, just shift. There is a moment in every woman's life when she stops explaining and starts seeing clearly. Mine arrived right then, with dirt under my nails and sunlight hitting my silver lashes. "Aiden," I said quietly, "open the door." "Why? You stuck?" He snorted at his own joke. God, he'd grown so tall, so confident in that careless way boys do when everyone cleans up after their messes. "I'm done," I murmured. Not to him, not to the camera, but to myself. I walked off the porch, down the 3 steps George built with his own hands 40 years ago, and around to the side gate. The garden soil crunched under my boots. The heat pressed against my bones. I kept moving, not fast, not slow, just certain. Behind me, Aiden's laughter faded, then stopped. "Grandma? Wait, hey, where are you going?" Oh, now he worried. Too late, boy, too late. My spare key wasn't under the doormat. That would have been too easy. It was behind the loose board on the fence, the one I never told Daniel about, because I learned years ago what happens when people know too much about what's yours. I slipped it free and unlocked the small side door that led into the laundry room. The house welcomed me with its familiar cool air. I stood there for a moment, letting the silence settle. My silence. My home. Aiden rattled the front door from the outside. "Grandma, are you inside? Seriously, it was just a joke. Open up." I didn't answer. Instead, I walked to the kitchen, poured myself a glass of water, and watched the live feed on my phone. There he was, my own grandson, pulling at the doorknob, looking around, confused, embarrassed now that his audience wasn't reacting the way he expected. And something in me, something long ignored, straightened its back. I had spent years letting this family treat me like a convenience, a wallet, a spare pair of hands, a quiet place to land. But I wasn't quiet anymore. Not after this. Not anymore. I didn't open the door for Aiden. Not then. Not after he called my name 3 more times, each one more uncertain than the last. Instead, I sat at the small kitchen table. The one George and I bought at a yard sale in '87, and waited for the shaking in my hands to settle. It wasn't fear. It wasn't even anger. It was the realization of just how long I'd let myself be treated as an afterthought in a home I had built with my own life. The house was quiet, the kind of quiet that carries weight. My coffee cup still sat in the sink from the morning. The laundry basket, half full, waited patiently by the door. Nothing in this house rushed me. Nothing demanded from me. Everything here lived on my time, my terms. George used to say, "A home is only as strong as the respect inside it." I'd forgotten that somewhere along the years of cleaning up after other people, feeding other people, paying their bills, mending their hurts, smoothing over their chaos. I'd forgotten I was allowed to be respected too. Aiden's voice startled me back to the present. "Grandma, come on. Seriously, just open up." He sounded irritated now. Not sorry. Irritated. I wondered whether he was more worried about me, or the video on his phone. I checked the security feed again. The camera caught his face clearly, annoyance twisting his mouth, the phone still in his hand. He had no idea the whole thing was already uploaded, just not where he intended. Saved. Time-stamped. Synced to the cloud storage I controlled. I set my phone face down and looked at the framed picture on the wall, George in his fishing hat, grinning as if he knew something the rest of the world didn't. He always said growing older wasn't losing strength. It was gaining certainty. Back then, I didn't understand. Now, I did. I walked down the hallway to our old bedroom. The floors creaked in the soft, familiar way they had for decades. My heart creaked a little, too, remembering how different things once were. Daniel, my son, had been such a tender boy growing up. Thoughtful, protective. The kind who ran home after school just to tell me about a test he'd aced or a kid he defended. But somewhere in adulthood, maybe around the time he married Claire, something shifted. He started talking to me like I was glass, pretty, but fragile, a decoration on a shelf. And then, not long after, I became invisible. Not maliciously, just conveniently. Convenience, I've learned, is one of the sharpest forms of disrespect. I opened the drawer of my nightstand. Inside were the old papers George and I had sorted. Deed, insurance, our wills, the mortgage papers stamped paid in full. My fingers skimmed over them, recognizing the neatness of George's handwriting on the labels. His presence lived between every sheet. Aiden knocked again. "Grandma, seriously, I have stuff to do." Of course he did. Teenagers always had stuff to do. Posting, messaging, performing a life for strangers. I wondered whether any of his friends knew how many groceries I'd bought for that boy, how many late-night drives, how many school fees, how many emergencies. No, of course not. Kindness isn't content. Cruelty is. A notification buzzed on my phone. I ignored it. I was tired. Tired in that deep, old bone way that comes from carrying a family on your back longer than they ever deserved. So I changed into a clean cardigan, put on my slippers, and finally walked back toward the front door. Not to let him in, no. Just to look at him through the peephole. He was pacing, running a hand through his hair, checking his phone, frowning at the camera. Good, I thought. Let him stew a little in the stew he cooked himself. But I wasn't cruel. I wasn't vindictive. Just done. I unlocked the door, but didn't open it. "Aiden," I said through the solid wood, my voice calm, steady, older than he ever remembers me sounding. "Go home." He froze. "What? Grandma, come on, just open it." I said go home. A silence. Then the sound of disbelief. Are you mad? It was a joke. I'm aware, I said, and I'll deal with it, but not with you here. Another silence. Softer this time. You're serious? Very. Footsteps shuffled. A deep breath. And then he muttered something under his breath. Something he thought I wouldn't hear. I heard every word. Every syllable. And it settled something inside me. Not pain, not fury, just resolution. I waited until his car pulled away before I opened the door. The porch was empty, quiet again, except for the slow rustle of leaves overhead. 65 years. The first time I'd told a family member to leave my house. The first time they'd been forced to listen. I locked the door, every bolt, every chain, and leaned my forehead against the cool wood for just a moment. Then I whispered to the woman I'd been, that was only step one. By the time evening settled over the neighborhood, the house felt different. Not quieter. God knows it had been quiet for years, but cleared. Like a window finally wiped clean after seasons of dust. I moved through the rooms slowly, noticing things I'd stopped letting myself see. The worn rug George loved. The dent in the hallway trim where Daniel crashed his toy truck at age 6. The soft hum of the refrigerator we bought together on a sticky July afternoon. All mine. All built from a life I had poured myself into, piece by careful piece. And yet my own family treated me like a guest in it. No, that's not right. A guest is welcomed. I'd been treated more like a service, a resource. And it didn't begin with Aiden's joke. No, that boy didn't invent disrespect. He inherited it, like an old jacket passed down through the years, worn, ugly, but still used because it was the only thing left in the closet. I headed into the living room, easing myself onto the old floral sofa. My knees complained, my back cracked, but the ache felt strangely appropriate. Bodies remember what hearts try to forget. I looked at the framed picture atop the mantel. Daniel at 14, smiling up at me, braces shining, one arm slung around my shoulder. I remembered the day so vividly, the rainstorm, the picnic that never happened, the way he clung to me when thunder hit. He loved me then. He trusted me then. Back when love wasn't calculated around convenience. Daniel grew up gentle. Too gentle, maybe. Always worrying about fitting in, about being taken seriously, especially once he met Claire. She was polished in that way women become when they've spent their whole lives being told appearances are currency. I don't blame her for that. But she had a gift for making people feel small, soft comments, lifted eyebrows, those pauses that are more judgment than silence. The first time she visited our home, she walked through the doorway and said, "Oh, it's cozy. Cozy." That word can cut like a blade if said the wrong way. I noticed then, as I have many times since, how Daniel's posture subtly changed when she spoke. How he straightened, tightened, tried to match her hauteur. I suppose marriage is often about compromise, but theirs seemed to require Daniel to shrink himself piece by piece. And he let her do the same to me. It started small. "Mom, Claire has allergies. Could you not use scented detergents when washing our clothes? Mom, could you babysit again? We're exhausted. Mom, the car service said it'll be expensive. Can we borrow yours?" Borrow. Such a polite word for keeping something until you forget who it belonged to. Then the financial emergencies began. Slow at first, then faster, until they blurred into one continuous request. Daniel always looked embarrassed when he asked, but he asked. And because he was my son, And because I remembered that 14-year-old boy clinging to me during a storm, I gave. Every time, I gave. Then the worst shift happened. The moment when they stopped saying thank you. It didn't happen all at once. Gratitude erodes quietly. A missed acknowledgement here, a rushed goodbye there, and then suddenly your help becomes expected. Owed. Aiden was raised in that atmosphere. He didn't create it. He simply grew inside it. I thought about him as I sat on the sofa. His lanky frame, his expensive shoes, paid for by me. His phone upgrade, paid for by me. His summer classes he never finished, paid for by me. His driver's license fees, paid for by me. And yet, today, he looked at me like I was optional. A prop. Something to point a camera at. My phone vibrated on the coffee table. I didn't rush. My bones didn't move for anyone anymore. A text from Daniel. Aiden said you got upset over a misunderstanding. We'll talk tomorrow. Please don't make things difficult tonight. Difficult. Oh, that one made me smile. That's the thing people say when their comfort is threatened, not their conscience. Another text followed. Also, we noticed the bank app says the house taxes payment didn't go through today. Maybe just an error. We'll check tomorrow. I closed my eyes and breathed deeply. Tomorrow? Yes. Tomorrow would be the day they understood the truth. This house didn't belong to Daniel. It didn't belong to Claire. It certainly didn't belong to Aiden. It belonged to me. Paid for by me. Protected by me. And tomorrow, for the first time in decades, I would act like it. I rose slowly, turning off lights as I moved through the house. When I reached the front hall, I paused, laying my hand on the door Aiden had rattled hours earlier. My voice wasn't angry when I whispered into the dark. George, maybe you were right all along. Maybe I should have stopped this years ago. But better late than never. Tomorrow I begin reclaiming what is mine. By morning, the house felt steadier than I did. I woke before the sun, the way I used to when George was alive and we'd drink coffee together on the porch, watching the world stretch awake. Now it was just me and the soft groan of my joints. But even that felt gentler than the voices from yesterday. I set water to boil and folded my robe tighter around myself. The kitchen clock ticked loudly, too loudly, reminding me of the decisions waiting in the quiet. For years, I'd postponed difficult thoughts the same way I postponed difficult conversations. Maybe next week. Maybe when things calm down. But life doesn't calm down. It only grows louder when you refuse to speak. I poured tea into my cup, sat down at the table, and pulled out the worn blue folder I hadn't touched in months, the one labeled, in George's neat handwriting, financial. Important. The capital letters still made my chest ache. Inside were documents I knew by heart, tax confirmations, receipts for repairs, the deed, the insurance renewal, even old notes about emergency savings George insisted we keep. He always said, plan when you're calm, so you're safe when you're not. I'd ignored that advice for too long. My phone buzzed again. Daniel. I let it ring. A voicemail followed. Then another. Neither deserved to be listened to yet. Instead, I opened a notebook and started listing everything I'd paid for over the past decade, just to remind myself I wasn't imagining things. Memory can be a slippery thing at 65, but numbers are honest. Mortgage refinancing for Daniel, $38,900 Aiden's summer college prep, $3,200 Claire's dental surgery copay, $2,600 the down payment on their SUV, $7,000 groceries during their tight months. Who knows school supplies every year? endless. I stopped writing. My pen hovered above the page. It wasn't the money that hurt. Money comes and goes. Respect shouldn't. Daniel's text tone chimed again. Mom, please call. Aiden is upset. We need to talk about yesterday. Talk. Yes, we would talk. But on my terms, not theirs. I set the notebook aside and pulled my phone closer. Not to call Daniel, but to open the security camera app. The footage of Aiden locking me out still waited in its folder, time-stamped, crystal clear. His smirk, his voice, his insult muttered as he walked away. People reveal themselves in small moments. I'd spent years excusing small cuts, thinking my love could bandage them, but 1,000 small cuts still bleed. The doorbell rang. Not Daniel. His knock was always impatient. This one was hesitant. I glanced through the peephole and felt my shoulders drop, tension dissolving just a fraction. It was Lily, my granddaughter, 15 years old, Aiden's younger sister. Soft-eyed, quiet, the only one who visited not because she needed something, but because she liked to sit with me, talk about her books, ask about George. I opened the door. She stepped inside and hugged me without a word. Her hug was the kind that stays in your bones. Dad and Aiden are freaking out, she said into my shoulder. Claire, too. They said you locked Aiden out. I pulled back and looked her in the eyes. Is that what he told you? Lily hesitated. He said it was a misunderstanding. I smiled. Small, tired, but real. It wasn't a misunderstanding, sweetheart, but it was a moment of truth. She nodded like she understood more than she let on. That girl always saw deeper than people expected. Do you want me to stay with you for a bit? She asked. No, dear. I'm all right. I placed a hand on her cheek. And this isn't your burden. Her eyes flickered, full of worry. They're planning to come over after lunch. I know, I said. Let them. Because I was ready now. After Lily left, I went to the bedroom, changed into a clean blouse, brushed my hair back, and applied a touch of powder. Something I hadn't bothered with in months, not to impress them, but to remind myself of the woman I was before I let life mute me. By noon, I was sitting calmly at the kitchen table with my tea when I heard the unmistakable rumble of Daniel's SUV pulling into the driveway. Doors slammed, voices rose, footsteps marched, then the knock. Sharp, impatient, familiar. Mom, open up. We need to talk. I didn't hurry. I took a sip of tea, set the cup down gently, stood, and walked to the door with the dignity of a woman who finally remembered she owns the floor beneath her feet. I unlocked the door, but kept my hand on the frame. Daniel stood there, face tight with irritation. Claire beside him, arms crossed. Aiden behind them, eyes down, jaw tight. Not one of them looked ashamed, just inconvenienced. Daniel exhaled sharply. Mom, what on earth is going on? I met his gaze calmly. Everything that should have happened years ago, I said. And I stepped aside, not to let them in as family, but to let the reckoning begin. Daniel walked in first, the way he always did, like the house adjusted to him, not the other way around. Claire followed with that clipped grace she wore like armor. Aiden came last, shoulders hunched, hands shoved into his pockets, suddenly very interested in the carpet he'd spilled soda on 2 summers ago. I closed the door behind them and stood there for a moment, letting the silence land. People underestimate silence. It reveals more than shouting ever could. Daniel exhaled loudly, his signal that he was the reasonable one. Mom, he began, we need to clear up this situation. Situation. Funny how people soften words when they're afraid of their own reflections. I walked past them into the living room and sat in my chair, the one place in this house where authority still lived under my skin. They stood in front of me like schoolchildren waiting for discipline. "All right," I said quietly. "Explain it." Daniel frowned. "Explain what?" "How your 19-year-old son thought it was acceptable to lock his grandmother out of her own home." Aiden stiffened. Claire's arms tightened across her chest. Daniel's mouth opened, then closed, then opened again like a fish that hadn't rehearsed for this part. "He said it was a joke," Daniel finally managed. "So was my reaction," I replied. "Apparently we share the same sense of humor." Claire stepped forward. "Evelyn, with all due respect." Ah, there it was. The phrase every woman learns to fear because it always precedes disrespect. "With all due respect," she continued, "you overreacted. Aiden made a mistake. You frightened him by locking him out and refusing to answer." I studied her face, smooth, unlined, carefully made. If she'd ever known humility, it had never stayed long enough to leave a mark. "Did he tell you," I asked softly, "that he filmed me while doing it?" Claire's nostrils flared. Daniel blinked. Aiden shifted. Aiden muttered, not quite looking at me. "I wasn't going to post it." "Not yet," I said. "But you recorded it." He looked up then, defensive, indignant. "Everyone posts videos. It wasn't a big deal." "Not a big deal. Not a big deal to humiliate a woman who fed him, sheltered him, loved him." Daniel pinched the bridge of his nose. "Mom, he's apologizing. Isn't that enough?" Aiden had not apologized. Not once. But Daniel believed saying the word apologize counted as the act itself. I reached for my phone on the side table. "Since we're clearing things up," I said, "let's review the facts." Aiden paled. Claire tensed. Daniel sighed dramatically. "Mom, don't—" I tapped once. The video filled the screen. Aiden's voice, Aiden's laugh, Aiden's hand locking the door, Aiden saying the words he thought I didn't hear. They echoed in the quiet room. Daniel looked stunned. Claire's jaw tightened. Aiden's face crumpled. "It was just a joke," he repeated weakly. "And this," I said, finally letting the weight of the moment settle, "is just the consequence." Daniel straightened. "Mom, what consequence?" Ah. We had arrived at the heart of it. I gestured toward the folder on the table. Papers neatly stacked. Signatures fresh. "I'm reclaiming my accounts," I said. "All of them. No more automatic payments. No more transfers. No more covering your shortages. No more emergency funds. No more everything." Claire blinked, stunned. "Everything. Everything," I said. Daniel reddened. "You can't just cut us off," he snapped. "We rely on those payments." "That," I replied calmly, "is the problem." Aiden looked between us, panic creeping across his face. But the car insurance? My tuition? Dad's loan payment?" "All of it," I said softly, "is now your family's responsibility, not mine." Daniel stepped closer, towering over me the way he used to when he wanted me to feel small. "You're making a mistake," he said. "You're not thinking clearly." I met his gaze without blinking. "I'm thinking more clearly than I have in years." A long, hard silence filled the room. Then Claire's voice, brittle. "So this is punishment?" "It's protection," I answered. "For me." Daniel's jaw clenched. "Is this because of yesterday?" "No," I said. "Yesterday was simply the first time you were forced to see what I've lived with for years." Aiden swallowed hard, voice cracking. "Grandma, I didn't think—" "No," I said gently. "You didn't. But I had. I'd thought long and hard. I lifted the folder. This house, I continued, is in my name only. It has been for decades. I've been generous letting you use it. But generosity doesn't erase ownership. Daniel's face drained of color. Mom, what are you saying? I placed the folder on my lap. I'm saying, I said, that things are going to change. And for the first time in a long, long while, they believed me. Daniel didn't speak at first. He just stared at me, his mouth slightly open, his confidence leaking out of him like air from a punctured tire. Behind him, Claire's expression sharpened, calculating, assessing risk. She wasn't a woman who cried. She was a woman who strategized. Aiden looked like a boy suddenly aware he'd kicked the wrong beehive. Change? How? Daniel finally managed. I folded my hands in my lap, steady as stone. By drawing boundaries you've ignored for years. Daniel laughed, short, humorless. Boundaries? Mom, we're your family. So start acting like it. That shut him up. Claire stepped closer, her voice softening in that way she used when she wanted something. Evelyn, we've had difficult moments, yes, but surely you don't mean to cut us out financially overnight. I tilted my head. Why not overnight? You never warned me before draining me dry month by month. Her jaw twitched. Aiden finally spoke, voice cracking. But what about my classes? I can't focus on school if you do this. The irony almost made me smile. He couldn't focus on school with my help either. He'd failed 2 classes last semester and never admitted it. Aiden, I said gently, you're 19. The world doesn't break just because it stops handing you things. He swallowed, eyes wet, but not from remorse, fear. The first real consequence he'd ever faced. Daniel spread his hands. Mom, this is extreme. So Aiden made a mistake. Kids do stupid things. He locked me out, I said. He mocked me. He filmed me. I tapped my phone. And he lied about it until I showed him proof. Daniel flinched. You didn't have to show us the video. Yes, I said, I did. He rubbed the back of his neck, the same nervous gesture he used as a teenager when caught lying. Mom, come on. You've always been soft-hearted. This isn't you. I breathed in slowly. No, it hasn't been me, but it will be. A silence so thick you could fold it settled over us. I stood, walked to the hallway, and came back carrying the thick folder, the one I had prepared after watching Aiden's smirk on camera last night. I placed it on the coffee table. Daniel stared at it like it was a verdict. What's that? He asked warily. Proof, I said, sitting down again. Proof of how much I've paid for in this family. Proof of responsibility I carried alone. Proof that you've stopped seeing me as a mother and started seeing me as a bank. Daniel's eyes flicked over the labels. Car payments, school fees, groceries, loans, repairs. Claire paled when she spotted her dental surgery receipt. Aiden leaned over, stunned at the sheer number of pages. I let them read, let the truth settle. Then I spoke, calm and clear. I am done funding irresponsibility. Claire lifted her chin. So that's it? You're abandoning us? No, I said. I'm stopping you from abandoning yourselves. Aiden burst out, voice trembling. Grandma, we didn't know it was this much. And for the first time today, he told the truth. I know you didn't, I said, because nobody bothered to ask. Daniel's voice rose. You should have told us. I met his eyes. And you should have noticed. That silenced him completely. I sat back, my hands steady on the arms of the chair. I've already spoken to the bank, I continued. All automatic transfers to you have stopped. All bill payments associated with your household have been canceled. Claire stiffened. That's Evelyn. The mortgage payment is due tomorrow. Then you and Daniel should pay it, I said. Daniel's face darkened. You knew about this for a whole day and didn't warn us? You had years, I said softly, to treat me like family. He exhaled in frustration, pacing. This isn't fair. Fair. That word again. Fair, I repeated, tasting the word. Fair would have been gratitude, respect, not treating me like an extra pair of hands when it suited you, and a burden when it didn't. Aiden wiped his face, muttering something under his breath. What was that? Daniel snapped. Aiden straightened, eyes glassy. I said, she's right. Daniel froze. Claire's hand tightened on her purse, and I, for the first time in years, felt something warm in my chest that wasn't heartache. It was strength. Aiden continued, voice shaking. She's right, Dad. I shouldn't have done it. It wasn't a joke. It was stupid. He looked at me, truly looked at me. I'm sorry, Grandma. His voice wasn't performative this time. It was small, earnest, frightened. The apology of a boy who finally understood consequences. I nodded. Thank you, Aiden. That's a start. Daniel stared at his son as if he'd betrayed him. You're siding with her? Aiden whispered. It's her house. Daniel turned to me, color rising in his cheeks. Mom, what are you planning? What else is in that folder? I rested my palm on the cover. You'll find out, eventually. Eventually? He echoed. Yes, I said. Because today isn't about you learning everything. Today is about you accepting one thing. The way things have been is over. Claire's voice cracked for the first time. So, what happens now? I stood, and the truth fell from my lips as gently as a falling leaf. Now, I take back my life. That night, after they finally left, the house settled around me like a living thing exhaling. I sat alone in the quiet, my hands wrapped around a cup of peppermint tea, the steam rising in delicate ribbons. The windows were dark mirrors, showing the shape of a woman I hadn't recognized in years, straight-backed, steady, unwilling to shrink. I didn't sleep, not out of fear, out of clarity. When dawn crept across the kitchen tiles, I felt something in me click into place, like a lock finally turning the right way after a lifetime of sticking. I washed my face, smoothed my hair, and chose a clean cardigan the color of pale moss. Then I placed the security tablet on the table, opened the bank app, and reviewed the cancellations. Payment after payment. Automatic withdrawals I'd forgotten existed. Charges that had become routine. And all of them stopped. It felt like breathing after years underwater. By 7 o'clock, I called my bank manager. A calm young woman answered, her voice polite, warm. I told her I needed to finalize the freezes and revoke access Daniel had to certain accounts I'd foolishly allowed him to help manage. She didn't question me. She simply said, "Of course, Mrs. Moore. We'll make sure everything is secure." Secure. A word I hadn't felt in a long time. When I hung up, I heard George's voice in memory. Steady, protective. You don't owe them your whole life, Evie. Not at the cost of yourself. I never listened. Until now. Around mid-morning, I sat outside on the porch, letting the sun warm my face. The hydrangeas needed pruning, the steps needed sanding, the gate sagged slightly at the hinge. Work never scared me. Neglect did. A soft car engine rumbled up the driveway, Not Daniel's SUV, not Claire's spotless sedan. A smaller car, older, rattling slightly. Lily. She stepped out with her backpack slung over one shoulder, her hair pulled into a messy braid. The sight of her, gentle, thoughtful, loosened something tight in my chest. She walked up the steps quietly and sat beside me without a word. "You okay?" she asked after a moment. I smiled faintly. "Yes, sweetheart. I'm more than okay." She nodded, picking at a loose thread on her sleeve. "Dad's really upset. He said he didn't sleep." I sipped my tea. People often don't sleep well when their comfort ends. Lily's eyes flickered. "Aiden told me everything. The video, the door, he said he deserved what happened." There it was, a flicker of conscience in a house where conscience had grown thin. "I don't want him to fear me," I said gently. "I just want him to learn." Lily leaned her head on my shoulder. "I'm glad you're standing up for yourself." Her voice trembled. I've seen how they talk to you. I always hated it." That pierced deeper than any insult ever had. "I know, sweetheart," I whispered, "and I'm proud of you for seeing it." We sat there a long while, listening to the neighborhood waking, birds calling, sprinklers starting, a dog barking down the street. Finally, Lily straightened. "Grandma, are you going to tell them everything you're planning?" "Not yet," I said. "People don't value what they think they still control." She nodded, like she understood perfectly. "What about today?" she asked. I looked at the house. My house. "Today," I said, "I'm meeting with a lawyer." Her brows rose. "A lawyer?" "Yes, to update some documents I should have updated years ago." She didn't ask what documents. She didn't pry. She simply reached for my hand and held it. Before she left for school, she turned at the bottom of the porch steps. "Grandma?" "Yes." "Don't let them scare you back into being small." Those words stayed with me long after her car disappeared down the street. And as I locked the front door behind me and headed toward my appointment, I finally understood. I wasn't becoming someone new. I was returning to someone I'd lost. Someone George would have recognized. Someone I was ready to be again. The law office sat on the corner of Brookside and Pine, a small brick building with green shutters and a sign that hadn't been updated since the 90s. I liked that about it. Anything too shiny always makes me suspicious. Shiny things usually hide scratches under the surface. Inside, the air smelled faintly of old books and lemon polish. A receptionist with silver earrings and kind eyes greeted me by name as if she'd been waiting all morning. "Mrs. Moore, Mr. Donnelly will see you shortly." I nodded, taking a seat on the leather bench by the window. A man in a suit rushed past, papers flying from a folder, swearing under his breath. A woman on the phone whispered urgently about a custody case. Life's quiet disasters happening behind every door. It struck me then that I had spent decades smoothing over everyone else's emergencies, tending to their crises as if they were fires only I could put out. But now it was time to tend to my own safety. "Mrs. Moore?" Jack Donnelly stood in the doorway, late 60s, thinning hair, glasses perched halfway down his nose. He used to work with George on contract renewals, back when we were younger and the world felt less sharp. He shook my hand firmly. "It's been a long time, Evelyn. Too long." His office hadn't changed at all. Same mahogany desk, same framed photo of his children, same slow-moving ceiling fan that clacked in the same tired rhythm. "So," he said as he closed the door, "what can I help you with today?" I took a deep breath. "I need to update my will." and I need to remove my son from any financial access he currently has. Immediately. Jack's eyebrows lifted, not in surprise, but in recognition. He had seen this before. People reaching their breaking point. "Tell me everything," he said gently. And so I did. Not the dramatic version, not the emotional one. Just facts. The financial drains, the endless emergencies, the attitude, the entitlement, the incident with Aiden, the video. Jack didn't interrupt. He just listened, really listened, the way people rarely do when you're a woman past 60. When I finished, he leaned back and steepled his fingers. "Evelyn, you've been more patient than anyone I've ever met." I laughed softly. Patience is how women my age were taught to survive. He nodded. And now it's time for protection. He opened a folder on his desk. "First, we remove Daniel as a beneficiary except where you choose otherwise. Second, we establish a trust. Do you wish to name someone specific?" "Yes," I said instantly. "My granddaughter, Lily." He smiled faintly. "Good choice." We spent the next hour going over details, contingencies, distributions, health proxies, property rights, my house, my accounts, my investments, my emergency fund even Daniel didn't know about. Each signature felt like reclaiming a piece of my own spine. When we finished, Jack folded his hands. "One more thing, Evelyn. If your family tries to challenge these changes, which I suspect they will, you'll need to be firm." "Firm," I repeated, feeling the word settle into me like a stone in a river. "Yes, I can do that now." As I gathered my purse, Jack placed a hand on the folder containing copies of the new documents. "I'm proud of you," he said. "Not many people take their power back after losing it for so long." I swallowed hard. "Thank you." Walking out into the sunlight, I felt a shift inside me. Something subtle, but seismic. My steps were slower than they once were, but they were surer. The street buzzed with weekday noise, buses sighing at stops, people arguing on phones, someone shouting for a dog that refused to listen. Real life. Messy and loud. But inside me, everything was quiet, clear. When I reached my car, my phone buzzed. A dozen missed calls from Daniel, 6 from Claire, 3 from Aiden. Then a new text appeared. "We're coming to the house this evening. Don't make this worse." I stared at it for a long moment. Worse. If only they knew. I slipped the phone into my purse, turned the ignition, and drove home. Not hurried, not anxious. I had documents signed, decisions made, strength returned. Whatever waited in the evening, I was finally ready. I arrived home in the early afternoon, the sun pressing gently against the porch and warming the faded boards beneath my feet. The air smelled like cut grass and distant exhaust, familiar, grounding. I stood there for a moment with Jack's folder in my hand, feeling its weight. Paper and ink, yes, but also the weight of finally choosing myself. Inside, the house greeted me with its usual hush. I set the folder on the dining table, smoothed the edge of the tablecloth, and allowed myself one deep, steadying breath. This wasn't a declaration of war. It was a declaration of independence. I brewed tea, chamomile this time, something soothing. I knew the evening wouldn't be, and right on cue, my phone buzzed. "Daniel, we'll be there in an hour. We need to talk in person." I didn't answer, not out of malice, out of choice. I spent the next half hour tidying, not to impress them, but to center myself. Straightened the cushions, dusted the mantel, watered the basil plant on the windowsill. Small rituals. Acts of quiet reclaiming. At 5:47, I heard tires crunching up the driveway, voices, footsteps approaching in a tight, unified rhythm. I didn't rush. I sipped my tea, set the cup down, wiped my hands on my skirt, and walked toward the door with the steady calm of a woman who had signed every paper she needed to sign. The knock came, sharp, impatient. I opened the door. Daniel pushed in first, Claire behind him, Aiden last, hands nervously twisting the hem of his hoodie. Their expressions told me everything. Daniel, angry, defensive. Claire, controlled but edged with panic. Aiden, shamed but hopeful for rescue. I closed the door gently behind them. Daniel didn't wait. "What is this?" he demanded, tossing a crumpled bank alert onto the coffee table. "Why are our payments bouncing? Why did the mortgage fail this morning?" I looked at the paper, then at him. "Because I canceled everything." His face reddened. "You canceled everything?" "Yes," I said. "Without even asking us," he barked. I blinked slowly. "Daniel, for 10 years, I've been paying your bills without you asking me. This is the first time I've matched your energy." Aiden's eyes widened. Claire swallowed hard. Daniel raked a hand through his hair. "This is insane, Mom. You can't just change everything overnight." "Overnight?" I echoed. "Daniel, you've had years of warning signs. You just ignored every one of them." Claire stepped forward, voice trembling with anger she was trying to disguise as concern. "Evelyn, this isn't like you. Did someone influence you? Did someone put these ideas in your head?" I actually laughed. A soft, surprised sound. "My dear," I said, "the only person who's ever influenced me is my late husband. And he would have told me to do this a decade ago." Aiden stepped closer, his voice quiet. "Grandma, are you doing this because of the door?" I shook my head gently. "No, sweetheart. The door was simply the moment I stopped pretending." Daniel paced, breathing hard. "So what now? You cut us off financially and expect us to do what?" "To manage," I said. "Like adults." "That's unreasonable," Claire snapped. "No," I said. "It's adulthood." A thick silence filled the room. Finally, Daniel pointed at the folder on the table. "What's that?" "The future," I said. "Mine." He reached for it. I placed my hand over it before he could touch it. "These documents are private," I said calmly. His jaw clenched. "So you really went to a lawyer?" "Yes." "And you're changing your will?" "Yes." "And we're just, what, supposed to accept it?" "Yes." Claire's voice cracked. "Evelyn, please be rational. We've always taken care of you." I raised my eyebrows. "You took care of me?" I mean emotionally," she stammered. I let the silence answer for me. Daniel leaned in, lowering his voice like he was offering a threat wrapped in concern. "You're 70 years old, Mom." 65, I corrected. "And you can't live alone forever." Oh, there it was. The truth behind the panic. I smiled, warm, steady, knowing. "I can live alone better," I said, "than living with people who treat me like a burden." Aiden's voice broke the tension. "Grandma, I really am sorry. I mean it. I know I screwed up." His apology felt real, but it didn't change the truth. "I know you're sorry, Aiden," I said, "and I forgive you. But forgiveness and access are not the same thing." Daniel swallowed. "So that's it? You're cutting us off financially, updating your will, and that's all we get?" I met his eyes. "No, Daniel, that's not all." They all leaned in slightly, fear tightening the air. "What else?" he whispered. I lifted the folder, held it close. "You'll find out soon," I said. And for the first time in their lives, they realized I wasn't bluffing. They didn't leave after that. I could feel it, the heaviness of people who had come expecting to win and now refused to walk away without reclaiming something. Pride, control, advantage, anything. That's the trouble with people who rely on you too long. They forget what dependence feels like. They think it's their right. Daniel stood there, arms stiff at his sides, eyes locked on the folder he still wasn't allowed to touch. "Mom, you're scaring us," he said. "No," I replied quietly. "I'm simply not afraid anymore." That unsettled him far more than anger ever could. Claire stepped closer, choosing her words with careful precision. "Evelyn, let's be reasonable. You're upset, and you're making rash decisions. This is clearly emotional." "Of course it's emotional," I said. "I'm a human being, Claire, not a utility." Her lips tightened. Aiden sank onto the edge of the sofa, rubbing his palms against his knees. He looked young, too young to be carrying the weight of his parents' expectations and his own foolish choices. But he was also old enough to know better. "Grandma." He hesitated, then finally lifted his eyes. Are you cutting us out of everything?" The question wasn't cruel. It was frightened. And that fear wasn't about inheritance. It was about the shifting ground beneath his feet. "No," I said gently. "I'm not cutting everyone out of everything. I'm deciding what's fair, what's safe, what's good for me." Daniel let out a bitter laugh. "Oh, so now it's all about you." "Yes," I answered. "After decades of being about you." The honesty hit him like a slap. He opened his mouth, closed it, then tried again. "You could have talked to me. You didn't have to blindside us." "I did talk," I said. "You just weren't listening." He looked away. I walked to the mantel, steady, unhurried. My hand brushed across the frame, holding George's photo. His smile, soft, knowing, met mine like an old friend. I felt steadier just seeing him. "When your father died," I said, turning back to them, "I lost more than a husband. I lost my balance. I started saying yes to everything because I was so afraid of losing the last pieces of family I had left." Claire's expression shifted, guilt flickering so quickly it almost disappeared. "And all of you," I continued, "got used to me saying yes." Aiden whispered, "I didn't mean to hurt you." "I know," I said, "but intention doesn't erase impact." Daniel sank into the armchair like his knees gave out. "Mom, what exactly are you planning? You're hiding something." "Not hiding," I corrected, "choosing the right moment." "What moment?" he demanded. "You'll know it when it comes." He raked a hand down his face. "This is absurd." "What's absurd," I said, "is that it took one teenager's cruel joke for you to notice how badly you've treated me." The room went still. Claire finally broke the silence. "So what happens now? Are we supposed to just leave and wait for you to decide our fate?" I almost smiled. "Your fate," I said softly, "has always belonged to you, not me." Aiden held his breath. "Grandma, are we losing the house?" There it was. The truth behind their panic all evening. Not love, not concern. Security. I sat down slowly, folding my hands. "I'm not throwing anyone out tonight, but I am taking time to consider what this house should be, who should be in it, who respects it, who respects me." Daniel straightened. "So, we should be worried." "If you're asking whether your behavior has consequences," I said, "then yes." "You should be. No shouting, no theatrics, just truth." It hit them harder than rage ever could. Aiden wiped his eyes with his sleeve, voice cracking. "I'll fix it, I swear. Just please don't make big decisions because of me. I'm making decisions because of everyone, I said, and because of years you don't even remember. Daniel looked at me then, really looked, and for the first time, I saw uncertainty replace entitlement. Mom, he said quietly, what do you want from us? I felt the answer settle inside me like a stone sinking to the bottom of a still pond. Respect, I said. Not occasionally. Not when it's convenient. Always. They didn't argue. They couldn't. Because for the first time in their lives, they had no leverage left. And I, for the first time in mine, had all of mine back. After they left that evening, the house returned to its natural stillness, but my mind didn't. Their voices echoed faintly in the air long after the door shut, like dust that takes its time settling. I cleaned the kitchen slowly, wiping the same counter twice without realizing it. It wasn't fear keeping me awake. It was clarity sharpening itself. Aiden texted late, a single message. I'm really sorry. Can I talk to you tomorrow? I read it twice, then set the phone aside. Not to punish him, to let the weight of the lesson settle. Morning light woke me early. I made oatmeal, poured tea, and sat by the kitchen window where the hydrangeas brushed against the glass. They looked overgrown, heavy-headed, as if they too were tired of carrying years of neglect. I was finishing my tea when a soft knock sounded at the front door. Not Daniel's bark, not Claire's tapping. A gentle knock. Aiden. He stood on the porch with his hoodie half-zipped and his shoulders slumped, as if the night had aged him. His hair was uncombed. He looked small? The way boys look when the world stops cushioning them. Grandma, he said quietly. Can I come in? For a moment, I saw the child he once was, the boy who used to leave dandelions on my porch and say they were flowers for my favorite grandma. I stepped aside. He walked in, but didn't sit. He stood in the center of the living room like he was afraid to touch anything. I need to tell you something, he said. I sat in my chair, hands folded. Then tell me. He swallowed hard. I wasn't trying to hurt you. I swear I wasn't. I wasn't thinking. Everyone online does stupid videos and I just wanted people to laugh. And did they? I asked gently. His face fell. I never posted it. I mean, I was going to, but I didn't. I didn't say a word. Yesterday scared me, he whispered. Not because you were mad, because I saw myself. I saw how I looked on the video. I didn't recognize that person. His voice cracked. I don't want to be that person. The sincerity in his eyes was unmistakable, a boy confronting himself for the first time. I motioned toward the sofa. Sit. He obeyed, dropping heavily onto the cushion, elbows on his knees. I know Dad and Mom are angry, he said. They're saying you're overreacting, but I think they're wrong. I waited. He needed to say this out loud. You've done everything for us, he went on. And we just kept taking. And taking. I didn't even notice. I thought, that's what families do. I guess I thought you'd always be there, no matter what. I exhaled softly. Love doesn't mean you get to stop seeing someone. He nodded, tears gathering. I know. I know now. A long silence followed. Quiet, but not heavy. A silence where truth could settle without breaking. Finally, he lifted his eyes. Is it true? What Dad said? That you're changing everything? The will, the accounts, the house? Yes, I said simply. He shook his head slowly, absorbing it. So what does that mean for us? For me? It means, I said, that you get a chance to grow up without leaning on me for things you should learn to carry yourself. He wiped his face. I'm scared, Grandma. I know, I said. Change always scares people who have relied on the old ways. He let out a breath that trembled. Are you going to cut me out? I studied him, really studied him. This boy who had hurt me, yes, but who was also capable of seeing the truth, unlike the adults raising him. No, I said, but I am going to hold you accountable, and I'm going to decide what role you earn in my life going forward. His shoulders sagged with both relief and responsibility. I want to earn it, he whispered. Please let me. I will, I said. But this isn't about promises. It's about consistency. He nodded, wiping tears with his sleeve. Grandma, I want to fix things, not just with you, with myself. That was when I saw it. The moment George used to call a turning of the tide. A flicker of maturity struggling through the cracks. I reached out and placed my hand over his. You can, I said, but you'll need to stand on your own feet to do it. He nodded again. And for the first time since the incident, I believed he actually would. Aiden left just after 10, wiping his eyes one last time before stepping off the porch. I watched him walk to his car, slowly, shoulders still slumped, but with a different sort of heaviness than yesterday. Not arrogance, not confusion, responsibility. The boy was learning, even if the adults refused to. I locked the door, not out of fear but out of habit, and returned to the kitchen. I had barely taken 2 steps when the rumble of an engine sounded again. Daniel's SUV. Claire's clipped voice carried before she even reached the porch. I let myself exhale once, then opened the door before they could knock. Claire was flushed, hair perfectly arranged, but tension pulling at her mouth. Daniel looked worse, uneasy, jittering with a restless energy I remembered from his teenage years, back when a failing grade made him fear disappointing me. But this time, it wasn't disappointment he feared. It was consequence. Mom, he said without greeting, why was Aiden here? What did you tell him? What I needed to, I said. Claire crossed her arms tightly. I hope you didn't guilt trip him. He's already emotional. I gave her a long, steady look. Emotional reactions are natural when people finally see the truth. She opened her mouth, then closed it. Daniel forced a breath through his nose. We need to talk. Now. Then come in, I said. They walked inside, but not with the confidence of before. This time their steps were careful, like people entering a courtroom. Daniel didn't sit. He stood by the sofa gripping the backrest until his knuckles whitened. Mom, we got a notice from the insurance company this morning, then another from the utility provider, and the bank called. They said you removed my access to your accounts. I did, I said calmly. Why? This time the question wasn't angry, just stunned. Because it was never your access to have, I answered. I gave it to you when I was grieving, and you used it long after grief ended. Claire's eyes flashed. You act like we stole something. No, I corrected softly. A theft would have at least required effort. Daniel flinched, his face twisting with something between shame and fear. Mom, we're not bad people, he said. We've just been struggling. Struggling. A word that can mean many things. In their case, it meant overspending. I walked to the dining table, retrieved the folder, and returned, not handing it to them, but placing it on the coffee table with a deliberate gesture. This, I said, is the record of what I've covered for your family in the last 10 years. Daniel stared at it, his throat moving. Claire refused to look. I didn't make these decisions lightly, I said, and I won't undo them to ease your discomfort. Claire stepped forward. You're being manipulated. By whom? I asked. My own conscience? Her cheeks flushed. Daniel tried again. We can fix this. We just need time and access. We can work together. I raised my eyebrows. Daniel, we haven't worked together in years. You've worked and I've paid. That's not a partnership. A silence stretched thin as thread. Finally, Daniel sank onto the sofa, rubbing his forehead. Mom, are you planning to sell the house? There it was. Fear. Pure and unfiltered. No, I said. Not sell. Both of them froze. Then what? He whispered. I'm deciding who gets to live in it, I said. And under what conditions? Claire stiffened. Are you threatening eviction? I don't threaten, I said quietly. I act. The truth stunned them both. Daniel swallowed hard. Mom, please, this house is mine, I reminded him gently. Legally, entirely, unquestionably mine. His eyes glistened. Not with anger this time, but realization. We didn't mean to make you feel used, he said. But you did, I replied. For years. Claire's voice cracked. What do you want from us? It was almost pitiful. Almost. But I didn't need pity. I needed respect. I want, I said slowly, a family who treats me as a mother, not a resource. And until that happens, I will protect myself. Daniel leaned forward, hands clasped tightly between his knees. Are you kicking us out? Not today, I said. Their relief was sharp, visible. But soon, I continued, you will hear my decision. The room froze again. Claire's lips parted. Daniel's breath hitched. And for the first time in my life, I watched them understand, truly understand, that the balance had shifted. Permanently. They stood slowly, like people moving through heavy fog. We'll wait to hear from you, Daniel said. Yes, I said. You will. And I walked them to the door, not out of habit, out of control. They left with the same uneasy silence they carried in, and after the door closed, the house breathed again. A slow exhale, like it had been holding tension in its walls for far too many years. I stood there for a moment, leaning lightly against the doorframe, letting the quiet settle over me like a shawl. I wasn't shaking. I wasn't doubting. I was simply steady. Around 6 that evening, as the sky began to dim into a lavender dusk, I moved through the house, checking each room, not for safety, but for clarity. My bedroom, neat as always. The bathroom with its faint scent of lavender soap. The linen closet George built himself, still sturdy. Every space held a memory, a piece of who I'd been, who we were. And I realized I hadn't been protecting a house. I'd been protecting myself inside it. By the time I returned to the living room, my mind was made. I picked up the phone and dialed Jack Donnelly again. He answered on the second ring. Evelyn, everything all right? Yes, Jack. I've made a decision. A pause, soft, respectful. Go on. I want to formalize temporary removal of residence rights for Daniel and his family. Not permanent. Temporary. Until boundaries are established. Jack didn't sound surprised. You're well within your rights. The deed is exclusively in your name. I can draw up the notice. Please do. And when would you like it delivered? I looked at the window, at the fading light, at the quiet street. Tomorrow morning. Understood. When I hung up, I felt no triumph, no bitterness, Only a sense of long overdue order, like aligning a crooked frame that had bothered you for years. A soft knock startled me. Not loud, not demanding, almost shy. I opened the door to find Lily again, clutching a small grocery bag. "Mom sent me to drop these off," she said, lifting the bag half-heartedly. "But I wanted to come anyway." I stepped aside for her. She placed the bag on the counter, milk, eggs, bread, and then turned to me, her eyes wide and troubled. "Grandma, they're acting strange. Dad's pacing. Mom keeps whispering. They think you're planning something huge." I smiled gently. "I am." She swallowed. "Should I worry?" "No, sweetheart," I said, touching her cheek. "You should trust that I finally learned how to protect myself." Lily's eyes glistened. "I wish they listened to you the way I do." "Maybe one day," I said. "But I can't wait for that day to come before doing what's right." She stayed a little while, sitting at the kitchen table, telling me about school, friends, a book she was reading. Ordinary things, grounding things. When she finally left, the house didn't feel empty. It felt fuller, because of her kindness, not their absence. After she drove off, the sky darkened fully. I made a cup of tea and sat in my chair, letting the steam warm my face. Tomorrow would be a turning point. Quiet, dignified, necessary. I didn't feel cruel for what I planned. I felt equal. As the clock neared 9, I whispered to the empty room, to the memory of George who had always known my strength even when I forgot it. "I'm not afraid anymore." And for the first time in a very long while, the words felt true. The notice arrived early the next morning, just after sunrise. Jack had arranged for a courier instead of an email. Wise, thoughtful. Paper feels heavier, more real. People take ink on a page more seriously than pixels on a screen. The young courier handed me the envelope with a respectful nod. "Mrs. Moore?" "Yes, dear." "Mr. Donnelly asked me to give you this directly." I thanked him, closed the door, and stood for a moment in the quiet hallway. The envelope felt smooth and cool in my hands, the way important things always do. I didn't open it. There was no need. I knew exactly what was inside. Temporary removal of residence rights. 30 days to vacate. A legal reset. Not punishment. A boundary. I set the envelope on the kitchen table, made myself a cup of tea, and waited. They arrived an hour later. Daniel didn't bother knocking politely this time. His fist hit the door in heavy, rapid bursts, 3, then another, then another. "Mom, open the door." I took my time crossing the hallway. Strength doesn't need to rush. When I opened the door, Daniel stood there pale and breathless, Claire behind him with shaking hands, and Aiden lingering farther back, eyes tired, shoulders hunched. Daniel held the envelope. He must have retrieved it from his porch moments earlier. "What is this?" he demanded. "Tell me you didn't sign this. Tell me this is some kind of mistake." "It's not a mistake," I said calmly. "It's clarity." Claire stepped forward, her voice trembling. "You're evicting your own family." "Temporarily," I said. "Until we rebuild trust." Daniel's voice cracked into a half-laugh, half-sob. "You can't do this to us." I looked at him with a softness he didn't deserve but needed. "I'm not doing anything to you, Daniel. I'm stopping what's been done to me." He shook his head violently. "We have nowhere to go. Do you understand that? We'll have to rent." "Then rent," I said. "The way every other adult does." He stared at me like I was speaking a language he'd never heard. Claire pressed her fingers to her temples. "Evelyn, we can fix this. We'll visit more. We'll call. We'll help around the house." Just take it back. I don't need promises, I said gently. I need consistency. Aiden finally stepped forward. His voice was small. Grandma, Dad and Mom are scared. I know, I said. Change is frightening for people who built comfort on someone else's effort. He lowered his eyes. Daniel paced the porch like a trapped animal. This is insanity, he muttered. We're your children. And I loved you enough to keep us all afloat, I said. But love without respect becomes servitude. Claire's eyes filled. So what? What are we supposed to do? Find your own footing, I answered. Use the strength you should have built long ago. A silence followed. Long, raw, honest. Aiden spoke first. Grandma, will we be allowed back? Yes, I said softly. When you learn how to arrive without expecting to take. Daniel wiped his face with the back of his hand. And what if we fail? You won't, I said, but only because failing will finally cost you something. For a moment, none of them moved. Then Daniel took a shaky breath. We'll pack, he whispered. I nodded. Claire gave me a complicated look, half resentment, half something close to respect. Aiden stepped closer and wrapped his arms around me gently. I'll do better, he murmured. I know you will, I said. After they left, the house fell silent again. But it wasn't the hollow silence of abandonment. It was the peaceful quiet of order restored. I walked through each room, touching the backs of chairs, the cool edges of picture frames, the soft folds of curtains. Not to anchor myself, but because the house finally felt like mine again. No tension, no demands, no walking on eggshells inside my own walls. Just stillness. Just peace. Just me. As afternoon sunlight poured across the floorboards, I sat in my chair, made another cup of tea, and allowed myself a long, slow breath. Tomorrow, they would begin packing. Tomorrow, the house would grow even quieter. But today was the first day in years I felt safe. The house was still the next morning, quieter than it had ever been. Not empty, quiet. There's a difference. Emptiness echoes. Quiet breathes, and the walls of this house finally felt like they were breathing with me again. I stood by the kitchen window with my cup of tea, watching sunlight reach across the backyard in long, warm lines. The hydrangeas bowed slightly under their own weight, their petals trembling in the early breeze. George used to say, "Flowers know the truth of things long before people do." Looking at them now, I believed him. By 10 o'clock, Daniel's SUV pulled into the driveway. No rush this time. No slamming doors. They stepped out like people walking toward a truth they could no longer outrun. I opened the door before they knocked. Daniel's eyes were red-rimmed, tired. Claire's shoulders were softer, her chin lowered. Aiden held 2 flattened boxes under his arm. "Morning, Mom," Daniel said quietly. "Morning," I replied. No tension, no drama. Just a transition finally accepted. They walked inside slowly. The house didn't seem to shrink from them the way it used to when their moods filled every corner. Today, it simply received them, not as owners, not as dictators of my peace, but as visitors passing through a place they'd mistaken for theirs. They packed in silence. Claire folded clothes with more care than she had ever shown in my home. Daniel lifted boxes without muttering or groaning. Aiden paused now and then, touching the edges of things he'd taken for granted. His favorite mug, the blanket I'd crocheted when he was little. And not once did anyone raise their voice. By early afternoon, the last box was carried out. Daniel stood by the doorway, the sunlight behind him making him look older than I remembered. "Mom," he said softly, "I know you won't believe this yet, but we're going to try. Really try." "I hope so," I said. "For your sake, not just mine." He nodded, swallowing hard. "I'll call you. Not for money. Just to talk." "That would be nice." Claire stepped forward next. Not proud, not superior, just human. "Evelyn, I'm sorry," she whispered. "For everything I didn't see." I nodded. "I know. And you can do better from here." She pressed her lips together and murmured, "We will." Aiden hugged me last, his arms tight, sincere, not desperate this time. "I'm going to change," he said into my shoulder. "You'll see." "I already see the beginning," I told him. When their car pulled away, I didn't wave. I didn't cry. I just stood there, letting the wind slip around me, letting peace settle into my bones where fear once lived. Back inside, the house felt lighter, wider. I brewed tea and sat at the kitchen table, the late sunlight washing the room in a honey-colored glow. My hands rested on the warm porcelain cup. My heart rested inside my chest, steady and sure. This wasn't revenge. It wasn't triumph. It was reclamation. The quiet victory of a woman who finally understood her own worth. I opened the window a crack. Fresh air rolled in, carrying the scent of cut grass and possibility. George would have been proud. I felt it. I knew it. And as the shadows lengthened across the floor, I whispered to the woman I had once been, the one who bent and bent until she nearly broke. "You came back." The kettle clicked off. A bird sang somewhere near the porch. The house, at last, was mine. All mine. If this story touched you, even just a little, leave a comment or follow for more. Your voice means more than you know.